Hi, I'm Tim and welcome to part 5 of my Home Assistant series for 2026. And in this part 5 we're going to be setting up this, which is the SMLight SLZB-MR3 with Zigbee Home Automation, so ZHA if you're more familiar with that term. Now just one thing to note, you don't have to use the MR3, you can use any SMLight Zigbee Coordinator, but I would recommend plugging them into the network via Ethernet and not USB because it makes it easier to get into the web interface when they're connected to Ethernet. So I'm assuming in this video that you're connecting it via Ethernet. So let's get started. So here we are at the computer screen, and in the first internet browser tab here, I've logged into my SLZB-MR3. Now, as I've said, it doesn't matter which model you're using, as they're all pretty similar. Now, some have 2 chipsets and some have just one. So what that means is they can be used both as Zigbee Coordinator and, for example, Matter over Thread at the same time on the alternative chip that they have inside. So there'll be 2 radios. As you'll see here, we've got Radio 1 and Radio 2 in this MR3 model. So that means they can be used for both Matter over Thread and, for example, as a Zigbee Coordinator. Now, you will need to note that because we will need to find the port number that we're using for the Zigbee Coordinator, which I'll show you in a moment. But also in the second browser tab here, I've logged into Home Assistant and I'm at the overview, so the home page or dashboard, whichever you like to refer to it as. So what we're going to do first is to install ZHA, so that's Zigbee Home Automation. Now if you prefer to use Zigbee to mqtt, then please see the follow-up part 6 of my video series, which will be coming soon after the release of this part 5. So what we first need to do is install ZHA, which is Zigbee Home Automation. So to do this, we click on Settings in the bottom left corner. Then we go to Devices and Services, and then in the bottom right corner we select Add Integration. Then in the search box type in ZHA and it should reveal Zigbee Home Automation. So select it and wait for the Select an Adapter Type window to appear, and you'll see we've got Adapter Type, so we've got a selection here. So what we now need to do is go back to the other tab for the SLZB-MR3 Coordinator, and then what we're going to do is select Mode. Now you'll see we've got Radio 1, so that's set to a Thread to Remote OTBR, and then Radio 2 is set to the Zigbee Coordinator. Now what you need to do is note the socket port for the Zigbee Coordinator. So here for Radio 2 we've got socket port 7638. So just make a note of that on a piece of paper or a notepad document, whichever, as you will need that shortly when we input the details in Home Assistant. And what you also need to note is the radio that's running Zigbee Coordinator. So in this case it's the CC2674P10. So just also make a note of that as well as the socket port. So once you've done that, you can then go to Z2M and ZHA at the menu option, and then under the option for CC2674, so that's the Zigbee one. If you recall, it just said it was running Zigbee. Now if you're using the EFR, then you would select ZHA for the EFR, but in this case we're selecting ZHA here for the CC26. Now you'll see we've got the radio type of ZNP. So what we now need to do is, now we know the radio type, is go to the other tab with Home Assistant, and you'll see we've got ZMP. So what you need to do is select ZMP. Now as I've said, if you're using the EFR chipset, you would click on ZHA here and it will say the radio type is different, so it's EZSP. So if you're using that, then you go to the Home Assistant tab and select EZSP. So whichever chipset you're using, you need to select it from the list. So it will be the top one, so the first one or the second one for the MR series. So we're selecting ZNP, which is running the CC26. So here we've got CC26 chipset type. So then we click submit, and then in the serial device path, what we're going to do is go back to the other tab for our SLZB, and we're going to copy the information which says socket and then SLZB-MR3 7638. Now again, if you're using the EFR, then you would copy the 6638 socket here. So in my case, it's the 7638, so we'll just copy that. And then what we're going to do is paste it into the serial device path here. We're going to leave the serial port speed at 115,200. And for the serial port flow control, we're going to leave that as none. Once you've pasted in the serial device path, you can then click submit, and you'll see we get a fail to connect. Now, if you do get a fail to connect, now you may not in some circumstances, but if you do, what you need to do is after the SLZB-MR3 or MR1, whichever you're using, you need to type in .local. So you should have then after .local the colon and then 7638. So once you've typed in local, if it fails to connect like it did here, then click submit again and wait for the next window to appear. Now if it still fails to connect like it just has done, what we're going to do is remove all the .local and the SLZB. So we should have socket colon / and then where the cursor is, and then after the cursor .7638. So where the cursor is now, what we're going to do is go back to the SLZB tab. We're going to go to dashboard, and then we're going to scroll down until we find the IP address. Now you'll see the IP address is 192.168.5.27 in my case. Now your IP address will be different. So what you need to do is just highlight the IP address, copy it, go back to the Home Assistant page, and then paste it in the serial device path where we just deleted the SLZB name. So then you should have socket colon / the IP address and then a colon and then 7638 or 6638 depending on which chip you're using, as I've mentioned earlier. So once you've typed in the IP address, click submit, and then you should get setup Zigbee. So what we're going to do is select setup automatically, and then it will say forming a new Zigbee network. We scan for a clear network channel as part of this process. This can take a minute, so just be patient while it completes. Now you'll see it's loading next step for Zigbee Home Automation. So just wait for that window to complete. And you'll now see that we've got device created. Now in the device name, we've got Texas Instruments. Now you can change this if you like. So what we'll do is we'll change this to SLZB-MR3. And then we'll leave the CC2652 so that I know which chip it's running on the coordinator. So what you can also do is add an area if you want to do so. So for example, living room, kitchen, bedroom, or whichever. But in this case, as it's just a coordinator and not, say, an end device such as a smart bulb or a smart plug, then I don't bother with creating it in an area. So just click finish. And you'll now see we've got the SLZB-MR3 added into Zigbee Home Automation into Home Assistant. So if you want to add devices, so for example, smart bulbs, smart plugs, smart sensors, all you need to do is click the add devices via this device. It will then search for Zigbee devices in your network. So once the device is in pairing mode, of course, it should then appear in the list here. So to get out of that, you just click the back arrow, and then you can go back to the overview page. And then from the overview screen, if you want to add further devices, all you need to do is click settings. And then you'll see we've now got a Zigbee option here. So you can just click on Zigbee and it will take you straight into Zigbee Home Automation, where you can just click add device, and it will then scan for more Zigbee devices such as smart plugs, bulbs and sensors, for example. And here you'll see it tells you the number of devices, entities, groups, options, network information, and so on. You can also download a backup of your Zigbee network, and you can also migrate the adapter if you're moving to, for example, another SLZB newer model. Then you can just migrate it and it will save having to repair and add your Zigbee devices again. So that's how easy it is to set up the SLZB-MR3 or whichever model you're using into Zigbee Home Automation into Home Assistant. So hope you're liking this series again, and thanks for watching this video, and I'll be back soon with part 6 where we'll be setting up the SLZB-MR3 with Zigbee to mqtt. So if you prefer Zigbee to mqtt instead of Zigbee Home Automation, then keep a lookout for that part 6 coming very soon. Take care and bye for now.